Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to start a vlog. It is mid-month book bash, the weekend, the second weekend of the month, every month that we try to read more than we normally do, starting on a Friday and ending on a Monday, first developed by Doris over at Aldi Books. And I am coming to you from Saturday. It is October the 9th. No, I'm sorry, it's not. It's November the 9th. I am so discombobulated, as I'm sure we all are. But I wanted to get this vlog started, and I do have a long weekend this weekend. Monday is Veterans Day holiday here in the United States, so I don't have to work that day, which is lovely. And let's just address the elephant in the room. The US elections happened last Tuesday. I'm devastated, I'm discouraged, I'm pissed off, all the things, and I'm finding it very difficult to focus, as I'm sure a lot of us are. So I am taking this weekend as a reset weekend, and I'm going to try to get stuck into my books and just, basically do some self-care. I did wake up this morning with a headache, so we're going to keep this one brief, this little check-in, and I'm just going to go through the books that I currently have on the go, of which there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One is an audiobook, so let's talk about that one first, since it's the audiobook. It's called Code Development. I can't remember the name of the author. I will put it up here. And this is all about the development of AI, and it is really fascinating so far. I am buddy reading that one with Britta Bowler. So I just finished chapter 3 on that one. So 3 chapters into that, enjoying it a lot so far, learning a ton. Did not know anything about AI really until I started that book. I'm also continuing this book, The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson, which I started in October. And this is Civil War history, nonfiction, by one of my favorite authors. So I will talk about that one, I'm sure, more in detail this weekend. I am reading There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension by Hanif Abdurraqib, and brilliant, just brilliant. I've read maybe the first 70 pages of this one so far. Buddy reading this one with my friend Rachel, and yeah, just gorgeous. So his imagery is so evocative, and I am a basketball fan, but I would say that this is a lot about culture and family and community, and using sort of basketball as a lens to focus his thoughts on those topics. And he's just brilliant. He's just a brilliant commenter on our culture today in the United States. So excellent. Started this one, Estrogen Matters, Why Taking Hormones in Menopause Can Improve and Lengthen Women's Lives Without Raising the Risk of Breast Cancer by Arum, Bluming, and Tavris. This is a book that I purchased with my birthday because I want to learn more about perimenopause. Basically, I am in that situation and I need to educate myself. And one of the things that there's a lot of misconceptions around and misinformation around is the use of hormone replacement therapy. And this book is about the science around what we know about estrogen and what impacts it has to the body. So I am about, where am I in this one? I am in 70 pages in on this one. I am reading Polio, An American Story, The Crusade That Mobilized the Nation Against the 20th Century's Most Feared Disease by David Oshinsky. My first Oshinsky, but he is excellent at science writing and writing about disease, as evidenced by the fact that he's won the Pulitzer Prize. But I was interested in reading this one because of my recent completion of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt biography, and obviously with his situation coming down with polio as an adult, I don't really know very much about polio. So this book is the history of what we know about polio, how we figured that out, and then the race to develop vaccines for the disease. So yeah, related to my reading about American president, had to go down another rabbit hole. And I am buddy reading this one with Doris over at Aldi Books. And then for funsies, I picked up A Court of Silver Flames, the last book in A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. This is fantasy, or as I guess it's called now, romantasy, because it has elements of a romance along with fantasy. And this is the last book in the series. And so far, I am like 300 pages into this one. I'm like combination reading it, hard copy, and listening to it on the audiobook. I had to drive a lot yesterday, so I got quite a few hours in on the audiobook. But this is centered on Feyre's sister, Nesta, and she's the main point of view character in this particular episode. It is the last book in the series, so I'm not going to spoil anything, but I would just say that what I am enjoying about this one so far is women finding their own power. It's very satisfying this week to read about a group of women who are like have decided to like take matters into their own hands and like find their own power. And I'm enjoying that aspect of the storyline very much. And then last but not least is a book I've been working on for many, many months. And that is The Deluge by Stephen Barkley, which is climate fiction. And I've talked about this a bunch in previous videos. And I only have like 120 pages left of this one, but I'm only going to be reading about 60 pages of it in this vlog for my check-in with Sean on Monday. So that is where we're at. That is the current state of play with my currently reading stack. This happens a lot to me in nonfiction November, that I just pick up all the things because I want to read everything. And evidently I want to read it all at once. So let's see how much progress I can make in any of these books this weekend. It's Sunday morning, and I figured I'd do a little check-in on how my reading is progressing this weekend. I think it's going really well. So I have had the opportunity to sort of rotate my way through all of the books on my currently reading list, I think except one. So with all of this nonfiction on the go, I have sort of been doing like a chapter on each of them and then moving on to the next. Although I will say I read more than that in this book. I've read probably about 75 or 80 pages more in Estrogen Matters. So I would say about this book, it is very scientific. So this book is all about the authors going through all of the research, all the scientific research about the impacts of estrogen on the human body, particularly women's bodies, and whether or not there is science to back up the claim that estrogen is going to increase your risk of breast cancer, heart disease, dementia, all these other types of illnesses. And so they're going through chapter by chapter each one of these types of illnesses and talking about studies that have been done where women who are either premenopausal or postmenopausal have taken hormone replacement therapy or not, and what the outcomes have been with these various different diseases. So it is quite focused on a scientific method, different journal articles and things like that, and going into them and talking about, how many patients were in each study and how was the research designed, and whether the research design was appropriate to the type of study that it was, and all that sort of thing. So if you're not interested in sort of general scientific method type discussions, I think this book would be probably a slog for you. But I'm finding I do read a lot about scientific methods, so I don't have a problem with that aspect of it. But they are literally going through every example. So it's also, it might feel a little bit overkill. But I appreciate that because I think the thing is with science is people often think that there's one definitive answer. And once you find that definitive answer, like you don't need to do any more science. And that's not the case. And so I have a quote here that I think is really appropriate for that idea. And so I wanted to share that. All scientific work is incomplete, whether it be observational or experimental. All scientific work is liable to be upset or modified by advancing knowledge. That does not confer upon us a freedom to ignore the knowledge we already have or to postpone the action that it appears to demand at a given time. And I think that is so important, not just for medical research, but for any kind of scientific research, whether you're talking about climate change or, you know, anything, any kind of research, like we can't wait for the perfect answer, right? We have to work with the knowledge that we have while knowing that we may find out something that contradicts that later on and have to change our actions. That doesn't mean that we can just stay in place and not do anything at this moment. So I'm really appreciating how the authors are laying this out. And I think, you know, if you are remembering the early 2000s when particular medical groups came out and said estrogen causes breast cancer, women should not take extra estrogen after they go through menopause, this book is super important to read because the science does not bear that out. The science does not show that estrogen is dangerous for everybody who are premenopausal, postmenopausal, whatever. So really learning a lot from that and getting a lot out of it. The other thing that has totally captured my attention has been this book, which no surprise, anybody who likes fantasy or genre fiction will know that sometimes you just get sucked in. And I have gotten sucked into this in the last 24 hours. So I am currently on page 510 of this one. I think I was on like page 300 yesterday. So I've read over 200 pages in the last 24 hours. I expect that I will probably finish this by the end of the day because I don't have anything else on my plate for the rest of the day. I've got all my chores done and all that, so I imagine that I will be spending a lot of time curled up in my chair reading this book, and I'm loving it. This is, I would say, so far, I mean, obviously I still have like a third of the book left to read, but so far I think this is my favorite one out of the whole 5-book series by Sarah J. Maas. So stay tuned for my final thoughts on this one. Okay, that's it. Like I said, it's Sunday about lunchtime, so I will be back to tell you how I got on today later on. You're propped precariously on top of a tissue box, but I just wanted to stop in and announce that I have finished A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. It is still Sunday, and the sun is rapidly going down in the afternoon, but I could not stop reading this book this afternoon, so I finished this whole thing. I mean, I had obviously gotten to page 300 before we started this vlog, but so, as I said, this is the 5th book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses Romantasy series. And this book follows the main character, Nesta, who is the sister of Feyre, who's from like the beginning of the trilogy, her sister, and other characters that we've grown to know and love throughout the series. But this is really Nesta's story. And Nesta is a difficult character. Throughout the rest of the series, I have been really irritated with Nesta for most of it. And you learn, you know, kind of what makes her tick. But what is awesome about this book is, for one thing, it's a complete story arc. None of this, you know, the two main characters that are in this book get their, you know, the focus is on their romance and on Nesta's growth as a character, and you get a complete arc. So, but there are other things that happen that I can't really talk about because of, you know, being the 5th book in a series. And I mean, this is the last book that's been published in this series, but I really hope that she writes some more in this series because there are other characters that we don't know the ends of their story yet. And so I think it would be a real shame if she just kind of leaves those plot points hanging. But regardless of that, this is my favorite book so far in the series. I can't believe I'm saying that because I really did not like Nesta before I read this. But the strong themes in this one of finding your place in the world, that, you know, just because you're a female doesn't mean that you have to be abused and, you know, stomped on all the time, that you can find your own power and claim your own power. I love Nesta's growth. I love the found family. I love the friendships that are developed in this. This is really, like, one of the central themes of this book is friendship and how you treat your friends and how to be a friend, and all that sort of thing. And honestly, the rest of the stuff, the magic and all that, was secondary to the relationships that were being developed between these characters. Just lovely. Just enjoyed it so much. And I always love, like, a story of a female like coming into her own power, like whether that be physical power, magical power, whatever, like just realizing the strengths that she has, and like learning how to face the world, standing on her own 2 feet without somebody coming along to save her. Love that. Anyway, really enjoyable time with that this afternoon, and I will be getting back to my nonfiction now. Hello friends, I am here to wrap up the vlog. I meant to finish this up yesterday morning, but it just didn't work out for yesterday. So it is Wednesday, November the 14th, no, the 13th, and I am wrapping up the mid-month Book Bash vlog. I did very well reading for this month. I read in every book that I had on the go. So if you remember, I had 7 books going when I started this vlog, and I completed 2 books. So I already talked about the Sarah J. Maas book that I finished. And then I also finished on Monday, I finished Estrogen Matters, Why Taking Hormones in Menopause Can Improve and Lengthen Women's Lives Without Raising the Risk of Breast Cancer by Arum, Bluming, MD, and Carol Tavris, PhD. And I got a lot of information out of this book. I think that it's very well laid out, and it goes through each of the diseases or health impacts of potentially taking hormone replacement after menopause that people are afraid of. Most definitely the biggest one is breast cancer, but there's heart disease, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's disease, a bunch of different ones that there have been implications that adding estrogen, like women taking estrogen supplements, can increase your risk for these different health outcomes. And the authors go through each and every one of those systematically and show the research and the science behind why that is not the case. And they go through risk and probability and what, the different things that you have to weigh when you consider taking any form of medication to treat anything. And I thought it was really well done. This is definitely a book you read more for the information rather than, for a good story. This is not something that's going to give you a good story, but it's well laid out. It brings all the receipts. There's all the documentation, footnotes, and bibliography in the back for the research that they did. And they are pulling from science research, so peer-reviewed papers, other types of documentation. This was not pop science at all. This is very much a book that's laying out the facts about what we currently know, the state of the research, and what we currently know about estrogen and what it does in a woman's body. And so I very much appreciated that knowledge being imparted. I thought it was laid out very clearly, and I got a lot of information out of this. And I think that the thing to know from this book, the big thing to know is there are a lot of beneficial reasons for why women would choose to take estrogen in their menopausal years. And I think you should do your own reading and your own research and speak to your doctor and all of those things. But the problem is that most doctors are not highly trained in menopause issues. So it's just a very like an hour of time in their entire medical career. Like that's the level of information that doctors typically learn about menopause when they're going through their training. So most doctors are not going to know. They're not going to be up to date on the latest science and research. They don't know about menopause. So you're gonna have to do your own work in that case, which no surprise, right? If you're a woman. If you're a woman and you're dealing with a medical condition, no surprise, you got to do your own work here. But I think this is a really good foundational text to give you the information that you need to understand what estrogen does for the body. So I very much appreciated reading this book, and I'm glad that I did. Now, before I close this off, I do want to come back to A Court of Silver Flames, which I did also finish this weekend. Because while I've been thinking about this book, because while I very much enjoyed it, I like the girl power aspect of this. I love a young women coming into their own and finding their own strength kind of storyline. I want to issue some caveats about this. First of all, if you start A Court of Thorns and Roses, it's very much a YA book. There's not a lot of sexual content. The characters are very young, and it's very much reads like YA. By the time you get to this book is adult fantasy. This book is erotic romance. There is highly explicit sexual content in this book. So if that is not something you like to read in your fiction, just be aware that there's a lot going on in that area in this book. Very different tone from the first book in the series. So there's a definite shift as you go through all of the books in this series in terms of the sexual content and how explicit it is. I would say the female characters are still read very young, but not as young as in the first book. So just be aware of that. And like I've read and watched some reviews on this book, and I don't disagree with a lot of people's thinking about this, but I just had a good time reading it. And for the headspace that I was in this weekend, this was a good read for me. So just wanted to come back and give that information for anybody that's thinking about reading Sarah J. Maas and that particular series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Okay, I think that is it for what I need to talk about today. I hope you're all doing well and finding some good books to read. I will talk to you later.